Hello, hello, hello. How are you guys doing today? Okay, today I'm going to bring you a little true crime. So welcome to Peter Watches TV, where I watch all the TV shows. I watch the true crime, like I'm going to be talking about today. I watch the reality shows. I watch Sister Wives. I watch all the trending shows on Netflix and Apple and Paramount and Peacock and Max and Shudder. I watch all the shows, and then I come over here and I talk about them. So if you're somebody that likes to talk about TV shows and watch TV shows, and you have found the perfect place. So please subscribe to my channel and come hang out with me while I talk about TV shows. And please feel free to leave comments in the comment section below about what you thought about these TV shows. I love to hear what other people think about the TV shows that I've watched. So the night before last, I started watching the new true crime documentary that is called Born Evil. Hold on a second, let me get into this. It is called, the full title is Born Evil, the Serial Killer and the Savior, and it is on Max. And I have been recommended this by several people. And to be honest with you, when I saw it, because it was called Born Evil, I don't know why, but there's a lot of like true crime documentary series that are called like, you know, Evil in the Midwest, Evil Lives Here, Evil this, Evil that. And so I thought it was like kind of one of those where each episode is something completely different. And I'll be honest with you, I've watched a few of those. I've watched, I think, 2 seasons of Murder in the Heartland. I watched every season of Murder on the Friday Night Lights. I like them. I don't love them. I like and that might change over time. I might grow into, because my opinion changes often. But I typically like watching a documentary, a true crime series that is just like one season and it's all about like one case is what I really like. And so I've been recommended this by several people, and so I wanted to watch it. So it was 2 nights ago I started watching it, and it's 5 episodes. Each episode is about an hour. I think there's one that's like 40 minutes long, but most episodes are about an hour, or about an hour long, and it's 5 episodes. I watched the first episode, and then I started watching the second episode, and I just was like enthralled. I was like, okay, this case, well, it says at the beginning of it, and it's produced by, who is it produced by? I think it's by Michael Bay. And Michael Bay is a producer of a lot of other, like, big movies, like Transformers and stuff like that. And so it's kind of like this is out of his norm to do a documentary like this. I've seen a lot of people online talking about it. But what it is about, he says at the beginning of it, this is about a serial killer family that you've never heard of before. And so it's mostly about this guy named Hadden Clark. And Hadden Clark is well, at the end of it, they say, some people are like, yes, he's a serial killer. Other people are like, I don't know, because a serial killer is typically 3 or more people. And he's really only been convicted of 2 murders. And so, so the documentary is about these murders that he has committed and the cases of them. And the telling of it is all told through his cellmate. And his cellmate is this guy named Jack Truitt, who, I just have to tell you, so the documentary is 5 parts. And the beginning part of it is about this missing girl named Michelle Dorr that went missing like in the 70s, I think. Late 70s, early 80s. I actually don't even, I was going to take notes and I didn't take notes. But she was like this 6-year-old girl that went missing. It was very, very sad. So she's at her dad's house. Her parents are divorced. And so she goes missing, and the dad is the main suspect because, like, his times don't match up, and there was a lot of dysfunction between the parents in this divorce. The divorce was really, really ugly. And he had made a comment to the mother, to his ex-wife, that if I can't have her, you're not going to have her either. And so there was a lot of speculation. He failed the polygraph test, and so there was tons of speculation that the father did it. He was a suspect for years. People always thought that he did it. Right next door to him lived Jeff Clark, or 2 houses down, lived Jeff Clark, the brother of Hadden Clark. Hadden Clark was staying with him. And the day that this all happened, Jeff Clark kicked Hadden Clark out of his house and said, you gotta go. Because he had been staying there for a long time. He'd given him a place to stay and said, you gotta go. Hadden Clark was so angry that when Michelle Dorr came over, I think she was 9 at the time. She came over to play with Jeff Clark's daughter, that they weren't there. Hadden Clark, his brother, was the only one there, and he allegedly, like, took her in the bedroom and killed her and things like that, and then disposed of her body later. So that's the case that they start talking about at the beginning of the case. But the whole thing is told through his cellmate, okay? And his cellmate is this guy named Jack Truitt, and he refers to Jack Truitt, and so do most of the people on the show, as Jesus, because he's got, like, long hair, and so he thinks that, like, God sent Jesus for him to, like, send those sins. Now, he comes out later and he says that that's not true. He never said this, but, like, there's years, he's written all these like notebooks and drawn pictures for Jesus to like basically tell the story of what happened to all these people that he killed. This Jack Truitt guy, so for those of you that don't know, I've been sober for 29 years. I'm in a 12-step program. There's lots of ways to stay sober, not just a 12-step program. I respect all of those ways to stay sober. September is recovery month, so hey, listen, any way that you get sober, I respect. I just don't want people to die from drugs and alcohol. This Jack Truitt guy, and he doesn't say anything about being sober, it was weird to me, is like so many men that I know in 12-step meetings. Like the way that he talks, he's like, hey man, like, yeah, like he just like was putting his liver out and it just stank up. And I was like, man, what are you doing? He reminds me of so many friends of mine in 12-step meetings. It kind of cracked me up a little bit. But he goes out on a limb because he wants to find where the body of Michelle Dore is for her parents. And so he convinces this Haddon Clark guy that's, I mean, has so many mental health issues and things like that, that he convinces him that he is Jesus and that he has to tell him everything that he did. In fact, he has to tell him like where Michelle Dore's body is and stuff like that. So then this leads to this 5-part series of Haddon Clark basically insinuating that he killed all these different people and basically going and trying to like show them where the bodies are. And he never really knows where they are, but this Jack Truitt guy has to always go with them. And so it's about that. The other case that they heavily focus on is about this girl named Laura that had just graduated from Harvard. And I think she was 22 or 23 at the time that she was murdered. And she just disappeared. And her mother, Penny, had hired this Haddon Clark to be her gardener. And so he had access to the shed that had a key to the house. Now, when Laura moved back from Harvard to move in with her mother in Bethesda, Maryland, she told him that he had to leave. And so this was, again, another situation where out of anger, he killed somebody. And when you look at every situation, it's always a situation where he's very, very angry that somebody treated him this way. I'll be honest with you, like there was so much that was so strange in this documentary, and the documentary honestly could have been 10 to 12 to 14 episodes. There's so much that it goes into. I mean, he goes in there and says that he was essayed by his father, and that he saw his father murder a woman and several people, and there's like this huge history of abuse from the mother and the family. The brother, Jeff Clark, is heavily interviewed in it because their other brother, Brad Clark, is in prison in California because he killed a woman in California and dismembered her. And so this guy has 2 siblings that are murderers, and like the one police detective says, one's in one side of the country, the other one's in the other side of the country. The murders aren't related. He's like, I don't think that's ever happened before. Like, we've seen siblings that are both at the same murder site or have done it together, but we've never seen 2 siblings acting completely like on their own in 2 separate like murder investigations. And so something horribly had to happen in this family to make these kids this way. And there's so much that's speculated. It goes into a lot of like gender identity stuff and possible dissociative identity disorder, which we used to know as multiple personalities back in the day. It goes into a lot of dissociative identity where he believes that he has this like this alter named Kristen that is the one that's doing all the murders, and Kristen's the one that likes to wear their clothes. And so after he murders these women, he often like puts on women's clothes and walks away, and like he wants to like be these women. So at one point, they hire this young FBI agent. She just seems, a lot of it's about Silence of the Lambs. It reminds me actually a lot of Buffalo Bill and Silence of the Lambs, and they even say that. They do this whole thing where for like hours on end, they harass, I mean, and the one guy, all the detectives are so cool in the documentary, but the one detective says, yeah, we got a lot of criticism for it later. I mean, they were relentless. He asked for an attorney like over 200 times, and they wouldn't let an attorney come into the room. And they like pushed him into a corner. The guy was like touching his face, touching his hand. He was like trying to like elicit some kind of response from him. Before that, because they just wanted to find out where Michelle Dore's body was. Before that, or Laura's body was, before that, they had these 3 women detectives come in, and they all had them dressed like in like really nice clothes and look, you know, like really like pretty and things like that, so that he would like be like, oh, like they're pretty, because they thought that he was attracted to them, but he wanted to be like them. And so finally, he draws like pictures of this Kristen, this alter ego that he has, or alter or whatever personality. And the one detective is like, oh my God, there's this new FBI agent. She's brand new and she looks just like his drawing. So they bring her in to interview him and she gets real close to him. And so that's when they like take him out. And then he tries to like, he hides in this prayer card, there's so much that happens in the show. I don't even know how to narrow it down. But he hides like a razor blade. This Jack Truitt guy, that's his cellmate, is so smart. So they're in the car, and he starts going crazy in the car as they're like driving to his grandparents' house, because he said he hid one of the bodies there of this other girl that was kidnapped. And when she was 9. I think Michelle Dorr was 6. This girl was 9. And he said that he killed her, and then he like dug up her body because he had buried it at his dad's grave. And then he like dug it up because they were looking for this Laura girl, and so they were on his radar. So he dug up the body and he buried it on his grandfather's grave at Cape Cod. And then they lead him all around the woods. And while they're driving out there, he starts going crazy in the car. Well, apparently they can't take anything religious away from him, so he has this prayer card around his neck. The Jack Truitt guy, his cellmate, tells one of the cops, he says, I think he's got a razor blade in there, he's gonna kill you. And they look inside of it, and he has a razor blade in there. His intention was to kill these cops. I mean, it is just so baffling. He finally tells this Jack Truitt guy that he's got this bucket buried with all these souvenirs, that he's denied keeping souvenirs for years. And it's literally a bucket this big. And he says he has other buckets buried as well. And it's just jewelry on top of jewelry on top of jewelry on top of jewelry. And at the very top of that, they find this college student graduate, Laura, who her friends were in it. It just was so tragic to watch her friends. They find her jewelry in it. I thought they did a fantastic job of really highlighting the victims and the victims' families. It's something I always look for in true crime. But they find her jewelry in there. They find, like, the remains of Michelle Dorr. So the cellmate helps with that. Jack Truitt. And basically, he's the one that kind of, like, facilitates telling this whole story. There's just so much that you could go into. I mean, like, one whole episode is really about his brother in California. It kind of, like, goes off. One whole episode's about Jack Truitt, the cellmate. Like, that's kind of how it ends. It ends with him telling about how he gets out of prison. Because the whole time that he's telling his part, you know he's not in prison because he's like in jeans and a shirt and got all his jewelry on. And so he finally is talking about how, because he was in prison for a murder that he says he did not commit. And you don't really know if he ever did or not. But he said he didn't commit it. And so he has served at that time 36 years in jail. Well, in the state, I think it's Massachusetts or Maryland. No, it's Maryland. That they're in, the governor will not pardon somebody that has a life sentence. So he wants to go before the judge to get his sentence reduced so he can get amount of years on it. Because if he has amount of years for it in the state of Maryland, he'll do 2 for 1. Indiana's a 2 for 1 state too, where I live. And so like if he gets 50 years, he only has to do 25 years. But he can't get pardoned if he has a life sentence. At this time, the governor of the state of Maryland is not pardoning anybody that has life sentences. But he has a life sentence. So he has to get it reduced. Well, the one police officer that he's worked so closely with, this Joe Gamble guy, is like, okay, he has like really helped us. He really went out of his way to help find the body of Michelle Dorr and try to find these other bodies as well. Like, I think that he deserves to be paroled or at least have a time limit put on. So he really has no hope whatsoever. He's like, man, I just knew that I wasn't going to get my time. He's like, this guy is like smooth. He is smooth. And so, he goes before the judge, and the judge reduces his time to 50 years, which means for 2 for 1 state in Maryland, he would do 25. Well, he's already served 36 at that point, so he knows he's going home. So it kind of ends with him going home. But then what it ends on is the producer through the whole show is talking to Hadden Clark and like interviewing him and asking him questions. And he's so like, you know, in fiction, we talk about like untrustworthy narrative or narrator that you don't know if you can trust them or not because they conflict their stories. And so it's kind of a technique that some authors use. So you don't trust the narrator, so you don't really trust the story. It's usually done in like horror novels and things like that. Well, with Hadden Clark, you don't know what to believe because one second he says, I don't collect souvenirs, and then the next second he's saying, go find this bucket, it has all the jewelry in it. So at the end of it, they find all this jewelry, and they find out, and basically implicating him that he's probably killed hundreds of people at this point. They say at least 100 is what they say, but they've only got him on 2 people. And so he starts taking back his stories, and he points out that he did some murder in the dunes, like near Provincetown, but then they suspect they find her body, and they suspect her husband, and then he's like, no, I didn't do it. I could have given them their name. I mean, he's giving completely conflicting things, which is a lot of like what you see in movies like Silence of the Lambs, where they give conflicting, you know, answers so you don't don't really ever know what to believe. A lot of this, I almost wanted to go in and look to see if Silence of the Lambs was kind of based on this case with Haddon Clark, because Haddon Clark reminds me a lot of, like, was it Buffalo Bill was the guy that was like, you put the lotion on the skin or else it gets the hose again. That guy, remember him? I mean, that guy reminds me a lot of Haddon Clark. And so when you're watching all this, it's just like, it's crazy on 100 level. It was such a fantastically done documentary. But at the very end, I mean, they interview at the end probably 10 FBI agents and detectives and investigators and police officers that are like, if he gets out again, he will kill. He will kill his brother. He said he's going to kill anybody that's done him wrong. And then it just ends that he's actually up for parole right now. And the last thing he says is, you didn't ask me about, and he starts naming off these people. He names off like 5 people. And the producer's like, why did you mention those names? And he goes, well, I lived in those places at that time. He goes, how do you remember their names when you never remembered anybody's name before? Basically what he's saying is, you've been lying to us all along. And he goes, well, I lived in those areas. I lived all across the country. And so then they list all the places that he lived in, right? And he's like, well, I lived in all those areas. One of the things that kind of freaked me out, in all honesty, was that they listed, like, I think Boulder or Denver, Colorado, that would have been close to where JonBenet Ramsey was murdered. And, like, this is very similar to, like, something that he would have done. And so it was so weird that he said all these names on there. And then he was like, yeah, you didn't ask me about that. And then the producer starts asking him some other questions, basically insinuating that he killed these other people. And he's like, oh, there's somebody at the door. I gotta go. And then he hangs up. And then it says that he's up for parole. I mean, it would be so scary if this guy got paroled. I can't even imagine how he would. People were saying at the end of it, like, these detectives were like, I will write a letter, I will show up, I will say this man cannot be paroled. I mean, the fact that this man is not sitting on death row is, like, crazy to me, or a life in prison is crazy to me, that he's actually up for parole. It's really, really scary. But it was a fantastic documentary. Even hearing what I just told you would not ruin the documentary for you. It is 5 episodes. It is riveting. It is fantastically done. Each episode kind of ends on a cliffhanger for the next episode, and every episode is fantastically done. It's so well put together. It is a really, really good true crime documentary. Very educational. I just wish it was longer, because I feel like it could have gone into the mental health backgrounds of, like, all the siblings, the abuse they suffered as kids, to help us understand a little bit more about the mentality of Haddon Clark, and why he did a lot of this. It attempts to do that. It kind of attempts to explain a little bit of why he would have done that. But I think to have had some forensic psychologists in there and things like that would have made it a lot more interesting to kind of go in there. I mean, they talk a lot about some of his mental health issues, but a lot of the interviews are from 20, 30 years ago. So it would have been a lot interesting to have, like, people today do it, but it was still fantastically done. I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't a second season to this. Anyway, let me know what you thought in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.